Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm here with Lisa Wyckoff from Global Minded. We are doing a series of sessions this week on rural resilience and focusing, especially the last few days, on Native education and today opportunities in workforce development with Native populations. And J.C. Wharton is Global Minded's head of rural equity and has worked with all the different stakeholders that are presented this week. So if it's your first time joining us, we have all of these sessions on our YouTube channel and you can share them liberally with your different audiences. For those of you who may not be familiar with Global Minded, we are about developing a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented, every way you can define diversity into the education, economic mobility, employment, and leadership pipeline. We do this in a number of ways, usually our annual conference, which this year has been stretched out over 4 months. So originally this week was going to be a really powerful pre-conference, and it has ended up being a session every day this week. And we look forward to seeing all of you next year in 2021. We hope we'll all be vaccinated then and hope you can all join us in Denver. So we have an annual conference. We have Inclusive Leader Awards across 14 industry sectors. We know that until the D&I leaders are as recognized as sports and movie stars, we're not going to see the diversity and inclusion that we need to see at the highest levels of leadership in our country and in the world. We also work with Global Minded collaboratives at 15 colleges around the country. Some of them are historically Black colleges, minority serving, and some of them are majority Native students as well. And we hope we can expand that with the work coming out of this week. So those are some ways in which we do our work. And now it's my great privilege to introduce J.C. Wharton. He's a senior level energy and financial professional with over 40 years of extensive experience spanning all segments of the corporate value chain from both physical and financial perspectives. This experience and his leadership positions with 6 Fortune 500 companies has provided him with the opportunity of working with many of the world's leading energy, mining, utility, transportation, and telecom companies at the executive and also at the board level. Currently, he is a faculty teacher at CU Lead School of Business, and he's authored many different articles, including a book that came out a couple of months ago called The Flyover Nation. So it's my great pleasure to introduce JC, and as he comes on, we'd like to ask each of you to put your name and your institution and your role in the chat so that the speakers have a strong sense of who's here today and how they might be able to better meet your needs. And you can also put questions in the chat throughout this next hour. Thanks so much, JC.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining the last of Global Minded's 5 webcasts on rural resilience. Today, we are privileged to have Don Kelin, President of Fox Professional Services and President of the Rocky Mountain Indian Chamber of Commerce, Matt Rantanen, Director of Technology for the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, and the Tribal Digital Village Network Initiative, and Melvin Monette, Indigenous Education, Inc. Before they begin, I would like to share just a few Native American facts for any of the audience today that may not have a strong Native American background. There are 573 federally recognized tribes in the United States, as well as a number of non-recognized tribes, several of which are petitioning for federal recognition. And as an example of the federally recognized tribes, in Don Kelin and my home state of Oklahoma, there are 37 federally recognized tribes that are domiciled there. There are approximately 5.2 million American Indian and Alaskan Native people in the United States. There are 326 reservations, and approximately 75% of those tribal members live outside of their reservations. Would you please put the slide up and you leave it up for just a second? These reservations total approximately 50,000 square miles and make up only 1.3% of the U.S. total landmass. So Lisa is putting up a slide that came from my book in the chapter on Native Americans. While she is putting up that slide, from 1778 to 1871, the U.S. government entered into more than 370 treaties with Native American tribes. All of these treaties have been abrogated in some form or broken altogether. Almost no treaties were broken by Native American tribes first. Interesting, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution holds that treaties are the supreme law of the land. So, having said that, I would like to briefly touch on the most significant Indian law case of the century. McGirt versus Oklahoma was issued just a few weeks ago by a 5-4 decision of the United States Supreme Court. This was a landmark case which ruled that as pertaining to the Major Crimes Act under the federal laws, much of the eastern portion of the state of Oklahoma remains as Native American lands of the prior Indian reservations of the 5 civilized tribes, and that they were never disestablished by Congress as part of the Oklahoma Enabling Act of 1906. The Oklahoma Enabling Act of 1906 united the western part of the state, which was Oklahoma Territory, with the eastern part of the state, which was Indian Territory, which was the first step for gaining statehood in 1907. But please note that on the face of this landmark case, this case pertained to criminal law jurisdiction only as it relates to Indian tribal law, federal law, and Oklahoma state law. The decision by the Supreme Court was seen as a significant win for Native American rights. Now, I want to go back for a moment when we talk now. As you can see, the vanishing lands of the Native Americans and where we are today only represents 50,000 square miles and 1.3% of the U.S. total landmass, as opposed to what the Native Americans had in 1492. So kind of a stark illustration of a disappearing lands. Okay, thank you. You can take that slide down now. So the decision by the Supreme Court was seen as a significant win for Native American rights, which have generally been denied by courts in recent years. Justice Gorsuch's opinion was seen to acknowledge that many of the promises that Congress had made to the Native Americans in turning over reservations have gone unfulfilled, and rejected the argument presented by the state and federal government that he summarized as, yes, promises were made, but the price of keeping them has become too great, too much time has passed, so we should just ignore them. The majority decision, which interesting, Justice Gorsuch is a conservative jurist that was appointed by President Trump. He was joined by the 4 liberal justices of the Supreme Court. Justice Gorsuch came from the 10th Circuit Court in Denver and is recognized by his 8 justice colleagues as being an authority on Indian law. So that was very significant there. The majority decision left open other potential impacts between territorial rights that may arise, which the court put to the state and the tribes to resolve amicably should conflicts occur. Chief Justice Roberts cautioned in his dissent that this could stretch to include taxation, adoption, environmental regulation, and other rights. Lawyers for the tribal groups asserted that the decision was narrow and affecting only Native American descendants within the lands, as no land ownership changed hands. The land and the 5 tribes issued a joint statement after the decision stating, the nations and the state of Oklahoma are committed to implementing a framework of shared jurisdictional understandings, procedures, laws, and regulations that support public safety, our economy, our private rights, and we will continue to work confident that we can accomplish more together than any of us could alone. So for the, as an example, for the Muskogee Creek Nation that the McCurt decision was based on, as of the 2010 census, there were 760,000 people living in the Old Creek Nation, but only 100,000 of them were members of the Creek tribe. So the point being, on this landmark case, the court recognized that many previous treaties were not honored and were abrogated by the US government. So that could possibly open up other treaties of the 370 to 500 treaties that were broken, like the Fort Laramie Treaty in North Dakota, that may have reference, that may come back to light on a number of issues. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that, the number of tribes, the number of reservations, and really where the Native Americans are now. So today, Don is going to pick up with business opportunities. Matt is going to follow with some of the technological challenges on tribal lands. And then Melvin will be joining on the education side. So Don, my fellow Oklahoman, take it away.
Thank you. Hey, good morning. My name is Don Kelin, as JC mentioned, but I'm from the Caddo Nation of Oklahoma. I'm a veteran, and I'm also chairman of the Rocky Mountain Indian Chamber of Commerce. We've got about 15 minutes each for our panelists, so I'd like to get started right away. First of all, there's no such thing as Indian time. It's business time. So if you're in the business world and you want to seek business opportunities, you have to go after business on business time, not Indian time. You got to understand who your target market is, whether you're selling with federal government or you're selling corporations. You know, if your target market is the federal government, there's organizations out there that can help you reach buyers, and they serve as a conduit to get you in front. You have your state P-tax, you have your Indian Chamber of Commerce, and you have SBA. SBA has a lot of tools and a lot of help. They can help you certify your company with various certifications that will help you reach federal agencies. Congress has mandated that every federal agency has to spend 23% or more of all their purchases of goods and services. This percent has to go to small business. So you have a federal law, a federal act that's out there to help you target federal agencies. The SBA can help you get certified as a woman-owned business, a veteran-owned business, a service-disabled business, a Hubzone, SDB, small disadvantaged business, or an 8A certified company. One of the unique certifications with the SBA is a certification called Hubzone, and that's historically underutilized business zones. For that certification, you have to have 35% of your employees need to live in a federally recognized hub zone, and your business has to be in a hub zone. Most of Oklahoma, because there's a lot of Indian reservations in Oklahoma, are hub zone certified. But the advantage of a hub zone certification, it's a 9-year program, and you have the ability that you can sole source with the federal government, or you can, or a federal agency can offer a bid just to 8A companies. Also, federal agencies will have your small business office. Now, these are offices that will help you work through the maze to reach your target market. Some of these are located throughout the United States, and all of the federal agencies have a small business office in Washington, D.C. There's also some federal acts that are real important if you're seeking Native American business with the federal government. The Bureau of Indian Affairs can purchase product under the Buy Indian Act, and this allows the federal agency of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they can sole source and deal directly with you and do not have to abide by some of the government regulations. Also, Indian Health Service, IHS, they have the Buy Indian Act, which will allow them to deal directly with Native American businesses. The Department of Defense, they have a Indian incentive program for their key contractors. The Department of Defense, they have the Indian incentive program. This allows major corporations that are DoD contractors, they can get up to a 5% rebate back from the Department of Defense for doing business with a Native American company in conjunction of fulfilling a DoD contract. So these are some conduits out there that can really help a Native American garner business. If your target market is the commercial market, there's an organization out there called the National Minority Supplier Development Council, and there's 20 chapters around the United States. Their sole function is to bring the buyer, which is corporate America, and the minority company to the table and introduce you. They'll have functions throughout the United States. They'll have opportunities that you can meet with them, and they really serve as the conduit to introduce you to buyers. Also, you still have the SBA that will help you, because many of the federal contractors or just corporate America will work with the SBA. Most of your major corporations today have a small business office. There again, that small business office is set up to help you work through their maze to introduce you to the buyers and to make sure you have the products or the services that the corporation will buy. You know, I think it's really important that you really understand who your business, who your target market is. Remember this, that Uber and Lyft, they did not reduce the taxi cab business 50%. The taxi cab business refused to change. So you have to stay active. You have to constantly improve your marketing game plan. You have to be aggressive, and you have to totally change your marketing strategies based on what's happening. You know, today we have the virus that's out there, and it's harder to get in front of people to touch, but you still have to touch your customer and touch new customers. And you can touch by email, you can touch by Zoom, you can touch by phone call, but you still have to be aggressive. You still have to go after corporate America. You still have to go after federal agencies. You just got to understand all the tools that are available, all the organizations that are available, and network and take advantage of the business opportunities that are out there for Native American. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the next session. speaker, please.
So I'll just go ahead and jump in, JC. Yeah. You're on mute still, I think. So,
Yeah, please do, Matt.
okay. So I'm going to tie this to some of the technology issues that Indian country is having right now and sort of the landscape of what we're looking at for being able to stay connected to the rest of the world, especially during COVID and, you know, the stay-at-home orders that a lot of us are experiencing, the lack of face-to-face meetings and such. So at the end of Obama's administration in the last year and a half, I worked with the CTO of the United States to do a study and figure out what the missing link was, why Native Americans are not engaged in broadband, why is there no broadband in Indian country? And, you know, as the reservation system was set up and you know, our tribes were put in the places where we currently live, you know, they during the treaties and things like that, the U.S. government determined that they would provide resources to that location, and some of those locations didn't have resources. So the way that they were going to do that was subsidize telephone carriers and providers to build out to those regions and support those regions. And over the years, we've seen that fail repeatedly. The federal government tends to send the same money or more money down the same rat hole, and we don't get any new results or connectivity. So during that project with the CTO, we determined that there were 8,000 missing middle mile connector miles for reservations. So where there's a fiber grid in the United States, there are what are called communication deserts. The areas that have fiber are typically major freeways, roadways. They typically travel the same as roadways. And all of the spaces in between where there's no major thoroughfare, there's no major fiber either. So the problem with that is that Native Americans that have the ability to build their own network, to support their own community, to connect their own homes, have no way to get a drain, as they call it, or backhaul to the rest of the world. They can't connect to the grid that the rest of the world is connected to for higher education, for, you know, primary and secondary education, you know, for job training and telecommuting, for telemedicine. None of those things can exist on a grand scale because you don't have that connectivity to the fiber grid of the United States, which connects you to the rest of the population. So why is that? Well, 22 years ago, 21 years ago, when the 7 major networks that were built at the time, built across the United States, they were valued on how fast you could build, how many feet you could build in a day. And that was their valuation process. So they were trying to get east-west and a couple north-south as fast as they could, and they avoided every pitfall. And so the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, you know, any of the undevelopable swamplands or like large estuary type lands like in Georgia and Florida and stuff, those things were all avoided. And so were Native American reservations, because they had to navigate something that took them longer, and they had to negotiate a deal to cross those lands. And so they just went around them. You can actually watch fiber go around a reservation and then come back out the other side in a lot of cases. So that's the missing component why we haven't probably gotten more penetration in Indian country. So as they've been trying to subsidize this over the years, we still only have 70% of the tribal homes on reservations that have access to a plain old copper telephone line. So access to 911. So 30% of the residents on reservations can't dial 911. So put that in your thought for a few seconds and realize how dangerous that is. Now, the horrible thing there is because there's no fiber densification grid in the United States, that also means that the cellular infrastructure doesn't exist in a heavy capacity in those regions either. So those same 30% that don't have access to 911 on a telephone line probably also don't have access to a cell signal. So if you look at that in normal circumstances, that's horrific. Now add COVID-19 global pandemic and stay-at-home orders and the risk of infection and spread and all of that kind of stuff. and you have a bunch of isolated people stuck in a house that don't have communications with anyone. So the battle now is to go as fast as we can to try to bridge that gap. We saw Arizona State University close out its last semester, and I serve on their American Indian Policy Institute board, with something like 62,000 students online finished their last semester. They had to scale some 50,000 students onto their online program and carry them through the last part of their semester to be able to finish their school year. And this year they're going online for the majority of their work. They're going online. So what does that do to Native students? I mean, it's bad enough for, if living in town and you have a crummy internet connection, but what does that do to Native students that have to go home to the Navajo reservation, that have, no resources? Some don't have running water, some don't have electricity. So how do you school from distance? How do you do these distance learning, expectations and continue your college path? You've made it to higher education. How do you do that without connectivity? And that's where it becomes nearly impossible. So the work that is being done by the tribes that are building their own networks, to scale so that they can support their communities, is a wide variety of bringing fiber in, trying to use federal subsidies like E-rate program, which now allows fiber builds for middle mile, connecting the school, the library, and the Head Start programs through the federal subsidy. But when that trench is open and that fiber is being laid, using their own resources out of pocket to lay conduit to be able to put in fiber for their own tribal uses later, because that educational restriction on that build is specifically for the entity that's connected. It does not allow to spread to community. So the tribe has to come up with their own resources when that is happening to be able to, provide opportunity for future growth. This is happening on I wouldn't say a large scale, but it's happening in a percentage of the tribes right now, and they are using these programs to build up. There's the CARES Act funding, which some of it can be applied to broadband solutions. The USDA RUS programs, the Community Connect, the Reconnect program, and some of the other funds that they have available for distance learning and telemedicine are available, and tribes are taking advantage of those. We just had the first time a tribal priority was applied to spectrum for use of broadband. That window opened February 2nd, and it was supposed to close August 3rd. We fought very hard for a 180-day extension. We got a slap in the face 30-day extension, but at least we got 30 days. And we have now I think it was this morning, it was 276 tribal applications in the system for the 2.5 gigahertz, which is a full licensed 3-channel chunk of spectrum to be able to deploy broadband in Indian country for their own use, or to lure in those carriers that may not see a return on investment for a tribe because of the numbers are too low, to be able to grab that carrier and then offer up a trade for use of the spectrum to be able to serve their community. There are movements in several sections of Indian country to understand that with your economic development, you must have broadband. With your education development, you must have broadband. With your distance, your telemedicine, especially being locked in your home during COVID, the general management of a normal disease problem or a normal issue like diabetes becomes very complex if you can't engage with a doctor, if you can't get in your car and go to the doctor and be seen on a regular basis, which is some of the maintenance that needs to happen with some of our people. If they can do a telemedicine scenario, it really allows them to function better and to have peace of mind in this, situation. And, not very many people talk about it, but mental health during a global pandemic is a really interesting scenario. People get cabin fever. People need social interaction. And if you get locked in a box and you don't have a way to communicate like we're doing today on this face-to-face call, it really plays on people's emotions and plays on people's mental stability. So the ability to actually do just what we're doing, or have a happy hour with your friends, or have a, you know, a chat session with a relative, that is crucial to the human condition. So we're seeing, you know, this value amplify during COVID-19, and you know, don't let a good emergency go to waste. Let's take advantage of all of these opportunities, the doors that have opened when this is happening, and actually apply this so that after COVID-19, we are established. We have the infrastructure in place. We have the thought process on a build out that supports our community businesses and our education and our health networks to be able to support our people moving forward. Should something like this happen again, then we would be prepared. But in the long run, how great would it be to be able to telecommute to your job and not have to leave the reservation? You know, how great would it be for your child to stay at home and do distance learning to their university on some of their general university requirements, and then actually engage at the university and move to where that school is to focus on their actual major and finish their career. But the general university requirements could be done at a great cost savings to the tribal home if they were able to telecommute and distance learn. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
So one of the things, Matt, I thought was interesting on Wednesday, I believe it was Kathy Worstel, that described the difference between urban and rural broadband was like the difference between FedEx and Pony Express. And since I live 27 miles from downtown Denver and have very, very poor broadband up in the mountains and poor cell phone, I appreciate that. Also, at this right now, very quickly, if we could go to a question that Montoya had about you had 60 at Arizona State, there were 62,000.
Yeah, so if I can find it online and share it for you. The CIO of Arizona State University, Lev Gonik, is a friend, and I was just on a call with them and they were sharing those numbers. So they actually have a statistical chart that shows how many students were in person, how many person were online. Then when COVID hit, then they shifted over, and how many finished the semester on that. So I can find that graphic for you, and I'll push it to the list.
So Montoya, at the University of Colorado, there's 4 campuses and there are 77,000 students. The campus at Boulder closed down on March 13th, Friday the 13th. But so we had to finish the classes up online and on Zoom, and it was really amazing. We were doing presentations. I had 48 in one class, but I had a student that was in South Korea that had better broadband. We had one student that was in Cortez, Colorado, and Southwest Colorado, down in the Four Corners area, that couldn't participate. He had to call in on a landline. So when you've got people from South Korea that are 8 hours or 12 hours ahead that have better internet than some of our students in the Four Corners area, that really created a lot of problems for trying to finish the class out for us. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, those countries like South Korea have, you know, that's a national movement from the way their government is structured, and broadband becomes a utility, and they operate it as a utility. So it is a feature that they build out to all, and they have a national capacity plan. Remember, South Korea is like, you know, the size of some of our states. So, you know, we're looking at the United States, and to do that in the United States would be a monumental effort. However, there are monumental efforts taking place on the ground in Indian country trying to solve this for ourselves. So I think if we can have some sort of a national, you know, at least initiative to try to support these small networks and be able to bring these small networks onto the major grid, I think we're going to be much better off as a country, you know, at a whole.
Matt, let me make a comment. The federal government issued a contract to AT&T to build a 5G wireless network for first responders, and agencies that are companies, agencies, tribe people that can use it are obviously the police, libraries, public facilities, and education facilities, plus Native American tribes. So they're building a 5G wireless, and the company that AT&T started is called FirstNet, and FirstNet's job is to go throughout the lower 48 states and build the 5G wireless system for first responders.
Yeah, I was heavily involved in the process for California. I helped California decide on that AT&T contract and was able to review that process throughout. I was working with AT&T to try to help place towers throughout California to strategically advantage the tribes in that, because typically the dead zones where their network already exists are the tribal locations. And so I was at a point when we were building up to signing the contract in California with AT&T, I was very involved behind the lines with FirstNet. Now that they've finished and signed the contract, then it went all to, oh, it's proprietary, we're not talking to anybody anymore. So we're trying to get AT&T to open up that process again and engage the communities, because the communities do know, where the dead spots are and how to better deploy that. I mean, tribal emergency services and tribal fire are some of the most involved groups in our communities to know exactly where everything is, the resources, the opportunities, the communication, and including them in the process with FirstNet so that AT&T builds out accurately is very important. So thanks for that.
We have a product that we have a strategic relationship with FirstNet, and it's called the Active Alert Network for Schools, strictly for emergencies. So I'd like to talk to you off camera sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's let Melvin jump in here and do our session, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time or can stay on for questions. Melvin.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. This is really, I'm more interested in what Matt and Don have to talk about than what I have to say, but I will go ahead. I am the CEO for Indigenous Education Incorporated, which means really very little to Indian country, but the meaningful portion is we are the home of the Kobel Scholarship Program. The Kobel Scholarship Program exists as a result of a $3.8 billion settlement with the federal government. Eloise Kobel was the lead litigant, and as the lead litigant through the settlement was allowed to say what was going to happen with some of the funding. And she made sure and advocated under advisement that $60 million of that was set aside for scholarships for American Indian Alaska Native students wanting to pursue higher education, and really left it at that very vague statement. We, with the Board of Trustees for those funds, which are endowed, so that $60 million will be there into perpetuity. We only spend the interest. But we really looked at what a scholarship can do for economic development for tribes, tribal communities, and for Indian people who, for whatever reason, are not living on their home reservation. So we wanted to know what that would look like. In our research while building the program, we realized that tribes, although have a lot of scholarship funding and a lot of money to help students to get higher education, a lot of tribes outside of those that have tribal colleges expend those dollars to try to get students to complete a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. And some tribes don't even go as far as a graduate school. But very few tribes invested in students getting a vocational degree. And one of the things that Eloise was really firm about was really understanding that a tribe can't fully run without having those people at that vocational level who know how to come into my PhD school, my tribal college, and connect the broadband, connect the internet, of all the folks who need that technical expertise. So we spend quite a bit of money and energy on making sure that we're looking for students pursuing those trades that are going to impact their community and who can make it a business. who can maybe employ other Native people, other people in their community. So we want to make sure that we have that happening in the scholarship realm. Scholarships as economic development is not new. We have a lot of students who need that scholarship to be able to pay their rent, to buy diapers, to buy food. It's always more than tuition and fees and room and board. It's everything else. And so we work very closely with financial aid offices and business offices at institutions to educate them. In fact, just before this call, while I was trying to prepare, I was on phone with a student whose Office of Financial Aid won't change their cost of attendance, although they are living at home, they don't have broadband access, they need to drive to the local high school, park in the parking lot, and use the spotty internet and the spotty Wi-Fi that they can get from there. And all of that costs that student money, gas and time to get to where they need to go to attend their classes because their institution is not in person this year. So the economic impact of that for that student to complete or not complete is really, really strong. Another thing that we do, and I'm kind of going fast through everything. Another thing that we do, and I see Montoya's on here with American Indian Science and Engineering Society, we work very closely, by we, I guess myself, work very closely with the CEOs and presidents of the other organizations that provide American Indian scholarships. We call ourselves the National Native Scholarship Providers Group. We just kind of work together weekly on phone calls and emails with the American Indian Graduate Center, American Indian College Fund, American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and us to discuss what our students are telling us every week, what we're learning from our students and what we can do to advocate in financial aid and scholarship world, what we can advocate to donors in development for, so that we can help donors to understand that thing that philanthropy is trying to help donors understand right now. Decolonizing the wealth and really using that research and that information from the book, Decolonizing Wealth, to help donors know, although we know that you earned your money in a certain way and would like to see it spent in a certain way, we really need some freedom and leverage to do what Indian country needs with your funds. We will make sure that it's spent well. We will make sure that we get the right educations to the right students for you, but give us a little bit of credit for knowing what our students need, what our communities need, and trust us. We will spend your money wisely. We will invest it wisely. And development is a part of economic development for tribal or for scholarship programs. We want to make sure that we have enough funding for our students to reduce and negate the need for federal student loans or any student loans. We spend a lot of time working with students to get them out of institutions that still use predatory loan practices just to get students enrolled. We do one-on-one counseling with those students to get them out of those institutions so that they can return home or to wherever they want to return and not have to worry about the student loans on their back while they're trying to build a business, while they're trying to build a career, while they're trying to purchase homes. So our students can in turn participate in their own personal economic growth for their families and for future generations. I'll leave it at that because I know there are going to be a number of questions. I have a lot more to say, but I think that's a whole nother session next year, Carol.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see, we have quite a few minutes here. Can we open this up just for general questions? Dr. Stein, Montoya, a number of the questions that did not get answered, please. We've got three great people and also, as Carol will tell you probably, I hope, at the end of the session here, this session will be on YouTube, and I was really very pleasantly surprised I noticed on the first three sessions of the week, those YouTube videos have been hit quite a bit. So I was very encouraged and excited by that. So questions, please.
And while people are doing questions, if the panelists can put their emails in the chat, I know that some of the health professionals have written me to say, you know, if they could have your contact information so we can connect and get some great things coming out of this, that would be tremendous. So, and the other thing I'll say is in November, we'll be doing an entire month highlighting Native incredible people, and we hope we can profile many of you for, you know, for our newsletter during that time, as well as celebrating, you know, veterans that month. So want to make sure we can work with you guys ongoing a number of ways. So let's get those questions coming, and just unmute yourself because we don't have as large of a group. So if you just want to unmute yourself and ask, feel free to do that.
I have a question for Matt and or Don in terms of the broadband access and the AT&T contracts to bring broadband to tribes and reservation communities. What is the process, or is there a process for subcontracts so tribal businesses and tribal individuals can work with these companies? Is there a process, or is AT&T coming in and doing the work and not engaging our communities as part of economic development?
Go ahead, Matt, I'll let you start off.
All right, I was going to let you start off, but so in the preliminary talks with AT&T prior to them winning the contract, when it was still a national competition, if you will, to see who won the FirstNet contract, there was talk about them using local workforces to be able to subcontract some of the work to. Now that they have won the contract, that conversation is closed up, at least to me. And I think they're using their normal subcontractors in the region. That doesn't include, you know, really small business, tribal focused stuff, tribal member stuff. So that I've seen in my area. But, you know, I'm in Southern California, and every region's different. Oklahoma is probably very different than Southern California. So I'm not exactly positive if that's how it's happening elsewhere. But I know generally in the state of California, from the Public Utilities Commission, from the Office of Emergency Services, they feel like they are not as involved with AT&T as they would like to be.
We met with FirstNet about 4 weeks ago in Dallas, and they have a Native American desk. So there's a Native American that's been appointed to work through the maze. Hopefully, you know, when you're working with tribes, that they have the Native American preference. Some tribes do, and some tribes abide by it. Some tribes are just like any other corporation. You know, they're going to do business with who they want and who they're accustomed to doing business with. So it can be very frustrating dealing with tribes, as it is with the federal government or as it is with corporate America.
Don,
but there is
is that a FirstNet of AT&T tribal person, or is that FirstNet, the federal organization that works with AT&T tribal person?
It's a FirstNet employee who is Native American.
All right, and who was that?
You know, I didn't meet with her. Unfortunately, I met with some other people with FirstNet, but our game plan is to contact her. I don't have her name directly in front of me at this time. Yeah, I can get it out to each of y'all.
Adam Geisler and Margaret, I can't remember Margaret's last name at the moment, were the two people that were working as employees of FirstNet for a long time doing the tribal outreach and relations, but I'm not sure if that's turned over. So I was checking. Okay. Melvin, did that answer it well enough?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Melvin, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but the Rocky Mountain Indian Chamber of Commerce, you know, our two key disciplines are economic development and to serve as a conduit. But over the last 12 years, we have been involved in over $275,000 in scholarships to Native students. And the only stipulation we have, they have to go to a Colorado college. But that's something I'm very proud of, because as an ethnic group, you know, you move up two ways. two of the keyways, I guess, are education and economic development. So that's been very important to us, and I'm very proud of. We're a little bitty organization, but we've given away over $275,000. So I'm very proud of that.
That is fabulous, Don, and we should make sure that we are working with your students with all the global-minded leadership of first gen and underrepresented that we do, you know, on the programming side of things. So
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
let's just, you can come over to the office again and we'll sit outside for social distancing.
There you go. So it looks like we have a question in the chat from Montoya, and it's, is satellite internet an option, or has it been explored for rural tribal communities instead of fiber optic broadband? So let me just explain that a little bit. If you are on a geosynchronous satellite, which is the traditional satellites that we know of, that would be your Wild Blue, your HughesNet, your some of the private ones called Tachyon, and then Viasat is a new player in the market. If you are on a geosynchronous satellite, you would not be doing a Zoom meeting like this right now, because the back and forth doesn't, there's a lag time because the satellite is so high from the Earth that when you click the button, it has to go to the satellite, back down to the Earth at their base station, go out to the internet, come back to the base station, go back to the satellite, and come back to you. In that time frame, you will be talking over each other and assuming the conversation rather than having the conversation. Now, I will say that it does work really well for click the button and then stream a bunch of content. However, those providers that provide to the consumer level have a data capacity restriction to them. So they only allow you to download a certain amount of data per month, and that becomes very cost prohibitive to the tribal home to be able to use as internet. It is nowhere near the speed of fiber, as was referenced, whether or not instead of fiber, nowhere near the speed of fiber as a solution. Now, there is a technology being launched through SpaceX called Starlink. There were two other low Earth orbit satellite providers that were in the game as well, so that we were looking at three to be playing in this market. A low Earth orbit satellite actually reduces the distance to the Earth so dramatically that it really is the slowdown between you using the internet from here to New York, well, I'm in San Diego, from San Diego to New York. So that's a reasonable amount of latency between a connection, and we could be able to have this conversation as we are today. We're all spread out and we're having this conversation in real time. So that technology that is being deployed, called Starlink, will be a technology that will be able to be used in rural America for broadband speed, connectivity, and we're hearing affordable rates. Now, affordable to whom? We're waiting for that final solution. But we're a little disappointed that the two other competitors to Starlink aren't in the game, because competition drives down price and increases opportunity. And we're hoping that one of them or both of them get folded into another program where there's at least two. But at the moment, we do have an opportunity for Starlink to be able to come into play, and you can actually sign up on their website to become a beta subscriber to their services when that becomes available.
The fact up here in the mountains, because of where I live, up in the mountains, up canyons, there is no cable where I live, and the satellites did not work for me. And what we have right now is a little antenna by a local service, month-to-month contract that's line of sight to a tower, and we're getting the best internet reception that we've had up here in the mountains, and all the neighbors went to that because we didn't have any other choice, and the satellite was not working. It was horrendous up here because, number one, we just didn't have the download speed. Plus, we get a lot of snow up here, and the wet, so the little line of sight antenna is the best thing that we have found up here in the mountains.
Yeah, wireless technology is one of the solutions for Indian country and rural America that has geography like Indian country. That will be the solution. You can't get fiber everywhere. I mean, optimal solution is fiber. But if you can't get fiber to your house, get fiber as close to your house as you can, and then deploy with wireless from there. So the amount of spectrum available in the United States to the general public is, you know, the width of a needle. The amount of spectrum that is available in general is, you know, the size of a football field if you stood that needle in the middle of it. The majority holder of that is the US government and the military. They won't release some of that spectrum for public consumption. They're doling it out as they feel like it's you know, we're being rationed, if you will. And some of that spectrum, we could open up a bunch more spectrum. We have a bunch more opportunity. At the Tribal Digital Village Network that I run, it's 650 miles long, and we support 15 tribal communities out of 20 tribes. And we have actually used in several tower locations every single available amount of spectrum in the public space. If we were going to do something new, we would have to take something down because there isn't enough available in the public space. We're a small potatoes thing. If we can use all the public spectrum, there's not enough. So we're having to pay for licenses and pay for things to be able to free up spectrum to be able to deploy to our homes. So that is an opportunity in rural America, as well as you know, all of Indian country. Wireless and a hybrid version of fiber network are probably going to be the solution in most cases.
Absolutely.
So before I turn this back over to Carol, this week has been amazing. The 5 sessions that we've had, they're all going to be on YouTube, and the speakers, the response for rural resilience, we made a lot of progress this week and really had some great sessions and wonderful speakers. So I would encourage everyone to look at the YouTube videos of the webcast. So it's been a great week. Thank you, Carol.
JC, you did a great job pulling all these people together. And as I said, we would have spent the day together, all these different people, if we had been live in the pre-conference. But I think that, like Matt said in his session, we have to really realize that we got to make the most out of the situation that's happening right now. And the truth is, you can actually reach some people that maybe couldn't have come to Denver at a time like this. And we can be building a lot of bridges with people who are otherwise busy and on airplanes. And right now we can actually reach them and really lay out different plans and ways we can mobilize those things. So it's been a real pleasure these last several years working with Matt. He's been on our International Advisory Council. Don, we just met. JC and I just met Don, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, or maybe it was before Christmas. I can't even remember when. And Melvin, we were introduced from Jack Soto from Native American Indian College Fund, and he was very sorry he moved to Wisconsin, couldn't join this week, but he's a really key part of our team. So my ask is that you all continue to work closely as a group with JC and Ron Lazard and some of the other folks who were leading this week, because I think really bringing these cross-pollinators together and under the bigger tent of Global Minded, we can actualize a lot of these things on the policy side, on the business side, on the education pipeline side, including, you know, the early childhood issues and how some of those things are affecting, you know, people in Native countries. So I think the last few years, you know, really, Matt, since you came our first year, I think it was, you know, things have really changed in the key leaders that are here now that have the perspective needed so that we're not operating with a whole bunch of different blind spots. And I think there's some great work we can do going forward and really outline the ways in which we can all support each other. So thanks again to all of you who joined us today. I know everyone has a lot going on, but we hope you will share these links that we will send to you, and they're all in our newsletters as well. But share them widely with your networks, because when people have more information on this, and a lot of businesses right now who don't understand these issues of Native or other people of color, this is the way that they can start to understand those things. And they may not sit down and read, all kinds of different, articles or, hundreds of books, but these are some ways you can get an overview, pretty easily. So thanks to everybody, and we'll be connecting on email. And Stuart, I'm going to connect you and John to some of our health leaders. And Dr. Janet Katz joined us yesterday. She's from Spokane and has worked a lot in Native countries. She's PhD and an RN. And you might know Arlen Myers and Dr. Sheila Davis. So we've got some other folks that I think will be real helpful on some of the other initiatives that you have as well. So thank you to everybody. Such an honor to be with you guys today. And Lisa, thanks for setting up the whole week, and JC for seeing it all through when we had to go virtual. And I think there are some big advantages that we will make the most out of this time because we are all virtual right now. So everyone have a great weekend, and thank you again so much.